Akedah Project.
We invite you to join.
One story, many angles.
Come learn with us.
The feminist methodology that I like to think about is, what is the assumption of invisibility trying to tell us, okay? First of all, Sarah's not invisible in this story, right? Because Rashi, according to the Midrash, will tell us that the very next chapter she dies, because when she hears about this story, she dies of a broken heart. Now that's the Midrash, except it places her into the story for us. So now that we know the Midrash places her into the story for us, we can start to ask all sorts of questions like, how did that broken heart happen? Who did she talk to? Maybe she and Hagar had this fantastic, women's conversation about what the heck, Abraham was doing. So I never assume that invisibility means that the character is not important to the story. The other piece that I find really interesting about asking where is Sarah in the Akedah is I think it's really purposeful that she's absent. I think the Torah on purpose takes her out of this story. You know why? Because if Sarah was in the story would be very different. Okay, let's imagine the story now with Sarah in it. And the Lord spoke to Abraham and said, take your son, your only son, the son you love. Take him up to an unknown mountain and do something to him there, and I'll talk to you later. And so Abraham woke up his wife, Sarah, and relayed the story to Sarah. And Sarah said unto Abraham, are you crazy? No, you're not taking him. Go back to sleep. Mashagana. Story over. End of Akedah chapter. Nothing to read on Rosh Hashanah. No excitement, right? By leaving Sarah out of the story is now possible, because the mother in that story would be an obstacle to Abraham taking his son. So that's the first way of looking at it. And the other way of sort of reframing this invisibility, if you will, is this is an Oedipal story. This is an Oedipal story. It has to be between the father and the son. There's no room for the mother. And we should talk about that. We should talk in our Devar Torahs, in our Divrei Torah, about why there's no room for the mother in this story and what it says about the relationship between father and son and all the stuff that has to be worked out between father and son. 3 words: recover, uncover, discover. Okay, so we're going to use those words always when we read into a text. When I read into any text in the Torah, any text at all, I want to uncover what the layers of that text are trying to tell me about the role of women at that time, the female characters or lack thereof. I want to recover through the Midrash any hint, like that Midrash that says that Sarah died of a broken heart, gives me a method to recover some context for how, what she said, what she felt, and discover. And discover for me as the feminist task of writing new Midrash, of putting Sarah's voice in there, of, as I said, imagining the conversation between Sarah and Hagar that must have happened outside the 10 flags, that night. So recover, uncover, discover, we can start to use the text as a feminist stepping point, if you will, for more, feminist exploration. That's number 1. Number 2 is, that I call myself a revisionist. My first book is Revisions. And so I want to revision the story. I don't want to rewrite it. I want to revision it. That means I want to look at it differently. I want to look at it with different eyes. So I'm going to bring my feminist 21st century sensibility and sensitivity to the reading of that text. Okay. And then I'm going to reread it. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it through the eyes of Rashi and the Midrash. And then I'm going to read it again. And I'm going to ask to unpack what I just read in my rereading. Well, first of all, it asks us very serious questions about parenting. And, I don't want to be heteronormative about this. And so it may ask us questions about what mothering is and what fathering is. But it does ask us questions about what parenting is, right? And that, to me, is a feminist question. If we haven't learned anything, over the last 30 years of feminist activity, if we have learned anything, it's that, every question that has to do with family life is a feminist question, So that's the first thing that I think it brings to us the task of questioning and asking, what is this story trying to tell us about what it means to fully be present as a parent, you know? Second thing is it asks us to talk about the sacrifice of our children for our ideals. Okay, so here is this father, and I think it's, again, edibly important, if I can like make up that word, edibly important, that it's a father-son conversation or a father-son narrative, because then we have the philosophical question of why is, in a patriarchal society, why are we so willing to sacrifice our sons for our ideals? Think about armies. Okay, I know there are armies in the world that have women in them, especially the Israeli army, but still it's a patriarchal notion that fathers sacrifice their sons on the altars of their own causes, okay? So that's, for me, a feminist question. And are feminists asking themselves, am I prepared, or am I even sacrificing our daughters on the altars of our own causes, on the altars of our own ideas? You know, the general question of the Akedah is, at what point do we say no to the voice, whether that's the voice of God or the voice in our head or the voice of society or the voice of authority? At what point do we say no? That far I'm not prepared to go. You know, famous Kierkegaard essay, Kierkegaard says that Abraham failed the test, because the test was, when do you say no? And if that's not a feminist question, I don't know what is.